Hi, this is Katie Bomberger here with my online teaching poster session for our final project. I'd like to start out by saying that I'm using the Mural app that was researched by one of our classmates, and it's a really neat tool for concept mapping and brainstorming, so that's what I used for this. So to start off my online teaching philosophy, I'm going to start with a quote from Rice. It is important for teachers to establish a nurturing environment where students feel connected and empowered to participate and take risks. One of the most important things I think for any class, face-to-face or online, is that the students feel comfortable sharing things with you. They feel comfortable trying new things. So that's why I chose that. Down here under my, this is more of my teaching philosophy. I think that the teacher, part of it, you need to give clear guidelines, scheduling accessible materials, and provide them with continuous feedback for their work. I also feel like creating that sense of community and supporting them fosters growth and responsibility for the students at any age. Another thing I think that's important for part of my teaching philosophy is just this quote again from Rice about understanding how learning online can be very stressful for students who have never done it before. As you know, some of the things, once you're familiar with them, you feel a little bit better with them, but just to understand that students can easily become overwhelmed. And allow students, I feel it's like really important for me to allow students to get to know who I am and to build a trusting relationship with me, just as I would in a brick and mortar setting. Also, I think it's really important, like we learned in one of our modules, to increase the accessibility of our online tools that we're using and keep the students engaged. So those are some of the things that I feel like go along with my teaching philosophy for online. One of the units that I could picture myself teaching, I'm actually really excited to try, is a unit on Greek mythology. And that goes with the standard of using Greek allusions like Herculean effort from the PA SAS website is the standard. I would have students work in groups to read different myths and discuss and identify the allusions using maybe a discussion board or the chat feature to do that, private chat rooms, that sort of thing. I would also like to have students use tools to present that myth, maybe create a slideshow, use screencast, to teach their class about that myth, and then they could post that for others to watch. I also would like to use this collaboration tool that I researched called Pen Pals to complete lessons on mythology, and then they can collaborate globally with students from around the world and discuss different myths. And then I would also like students to co-author a myth, whether they're using Google Docs or another online tool for them to author together. Synchronous learning. I would like to have them we could do concept mapping together. This website is great for that. Also Poplet if you're using an Apple device, or Webspiration. For synchronous learning, I would also keep in mind web conferencing tools like Skype and Zoom for presentation and discussion. Chat tools I would use definitely to foster discussion and share opinions. That could be in your learning management system, whatever platform you're using. I got the references for these tools that I would like to use here from Table 5.1 in the Rice text. For the asynchronous learning, thinking about Google Docs to do some collaborative co-authoring here. I also think that using the learning management system, just as we have in this class, for posting PDFs, for reading materials, audio, text, videos, links, class postings, schedule updates or announcements, is really important. I think you need to have a good balance of both. Some students do well when they can work at their own pace according to the schedule, and then, meet up with classmates as needed and the teacher. I also really like discussion boards for student responses and reflections, and if you want to keep those reflections private, you could do a private discussion with that. Again, some of these tools that I really like for asynchronous learning come from the Rice Text Table 5.1 on page 106. A few of the things, it's hard to pick just a few, considerations for management. One thing that I found to be really important, especially when we taught our own lesson, is to definitely learn the tool, mess around with it, play with it, try all the different functions before you're actually using it with students, because once you get in that online setting, there's no turning back. So that's definitely important. And all the references for these things I got are down here at the bottom of the sticky notes, which is really neat. If you wanted to add a sticky, just a side note, you can go up here and add another sticky. Again, just like we have done in this class, I think it's really important that at the onset of the class and before you give out any assignments, you have a discussion, posting rules, expectations for appropriate netiquette and class rules just before anything begins, just as you would do in a brick and mortar classroom. Another thing that I feel is extremely important is to give students enough time to think, enough time to reflect, enough time to complete the assignments and use the tools. Because I know for myself, as I'm doing this, I cannot do this all at one shot. First there's a part that I go and I take notes and I organize my thoughts. And then I start putting my project together. And then later on, after I put the project together, then I'll complete the screencast. And it is a series of steps that I go through before I can complete this. So I think that's important for our students as well. I also think it's really important to determine your students' level of experience with certain tools before you go ahead and learn, use them, just to see what they have and have not used. If no one is familiar or not feeling comfortable, I think it's really important to provide those tutorials for them. If they need it, it's there, and if they don't need it, that's fine too, or if they just need a refresher. Along with the social presence model, I really think that sharing prior knowledge and experiences is important. In considering management, we can get a lot of information from our classmates, from one another. We can get information from our teacher. And I think that can really help when we're stuck with a new tool or we're not sure how to set something up. That's something that we can always have that discussion, that help board there for, and I think that's very important too. Considerations for assessment. This is coming from the Rice Text Table 5.4. Just like I do in brick and mortar classrooms, it's really important to be constantly assessing them informally to get a gauge of where they're at in their learning. I think we can do this through reflections, discussions, chat. For formal assessments, it might look a little different. It might not be the paper and pencil test like you give in the classroom. It could be, although it could be online testing. Like if you're building them through the platform I use at my school, Schoology, you can do that. They can demonstrate mastery through presentations, through projects, I even think through written discussions, like this one here. I also found this quote to be very, very helpful. The process is not as much about developing the assessment instruments, but determining exactly how and what to assess. Making sure it's aligned with your essential questions and objectives is imperative, and I think sometimes it's easy to go astray from that when you're designing assessments. So always keeping that in mind. Another thing to think about when you are considering assessments is, are you going to be looking for individual outcomes where students are assessed individually, or are you going to be looking for them to work together and have some collective outcomes? And that comes from the Rice text. And it's not something that I think I necessarily think about as much in the brick and mortar, because most of the assessments we do are individual. Finally, from the social presence model, I think that building a sense of community, okay, as they're saying here in this quote, building a sense of community can have a significant impact on student productivity, academic achievement, student attitudes, and overall engagement. That's a huge consideration for assessment. It's really saying that the way the student feels about the class, they're part of a class, you know, they're being built up by one another, engaging with one another, it can really help the overall outcome of their hard work. So I think that's something that we need to take into consideration. Finally, moving over to my next page, I have my ahas. My first aha came when we taught our online lesson. It clearly takes practice and persistence, and you can't give up, which is something that is true for brick and mortar as well. I've had many lessons go south, but you have to pick yourself back up and try again and realize that you're new at this and everything takes practice. My other aha moment was some of these online tools seem intimidating. I just can get very overwhelmed with things, but this class has given me the opportunity to use, for example, this mural tool, which I've never used before, and I think it is awesome. The other thing is the time that is involved in organizing an online lesson. I assume, or I would hope, that, you know, once you get a pattern down of the way you organize things, it would go a little bit faster, but the time. Organizing, having everything ready to go, making everything you have online accessible, and learning how to make sure every option that you can do for accessibility has been done. My questions that I have. What's the best piece of advice that you have to give for a new online teacher? Anything helpful, constructive? That's what I have. What is the biggest piece of advice to give? What are a few of the best tools to start with? Some of the basic things I could use. And what is the first thing that you would choose to work on or decide upon when you're teaching an online course? What do you start with first? I know you're always going to be starting with your objectives, but after that, how do you start building your class, I guess, is a clearer way to ask that question. And up here, I just have learning how to teach and learn online involves considerable amount of flexibility, adaptability, and dedications from teachers and their students. That's from the Social Presence Model article that we read earlier in the course. I think that's true for any kind of teaching that you do. But I chose this because hard work doesn't feel like hard work when you're doing what you love. So teaching, whether online or face-to-face, is something that I think is incredible, and it's a gift. So that is my poster session for online teaching. Thank you for watching, and I've really enjoyed the class.